In today's show, we're looking at the Charlotte Hornets season. What was it? What does it mean? What do we do moving forward? Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. You can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Last show for the week. Next week we'll be back with more team reviews. And what else is on the schedule for next week? Let's have a look. I think it's just team reviews next week, and then we'll get into some other interesting stuff after that. We'll see. Something else might crop up. You never know. We're here to talk Charlotte Hornets and their season.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right. This team was bad all season. A lot of things went wrong for them, but a lot of the things that went wrong were their own fault. A botched coaching hire, an inept and directionless ownership group and front office, and multiple wrong, screwed up first-round draft picks. It's bad. It's a terrible combination. But in saying all that, they're not dreadful. Steve Clifford is fine as a coach. He improved their defense significantly. He's definitely not a needle mover. The whole process behind getting him was pretty silly. And then, of course, they had all the Miles Bridges stuff. Hovering over them all season. We'll talk a little bit about Miles Bridges later on. And when we talk about some dynasty value, obviously he's got no stats to talk about from this season because he didn't play at all this season. For the Hornets, Steve Clifford will be back. You expect that Mitch Kupchak is back again, which is, again, pretty disgusting. As their general manager, he's been completely uninspired in the choices and the way that he approaches NBA basketball. Will Michael Jordan be back as their owner? I don't know. Apparently he's looking to sell, and maybe that just shakes up a lot. They probably need that. For as much as it's great to have Michael Jordan as an owner in the NBA, he's bad at it, and we need better owners to improve these franchises. They were 27-55. They had a net rating of negative 6.2, which is 27th, basically right where they finished. They had the 30th best offense, which is, again, part of it's a Clifford thing, but part of it's also losing Miles Bridges and having a half a season of LaMelo Ball. So they were bad. And 20th in defense, and that was top 10 second half of the season. They really, really improved, which, given some of their limited personnel, the credit does go a lot of that to Steve Clifford, and that's fantastic. Like that's a big step for him. Again, I don't really see the point of him being their coach, but that was a big step forward. Their best lineup of players who ended the season on this team: Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Nick Richards. Nick Richards, not Mark Williams, which is interesting. Negative 4.5, still a negative net rating. But I think their five best lineups or five most played lineups had Mason Plumlee in it, the cockroach, but of course he was traded. But their best lineup that qualified with over 100 possessions was Rozier, Oubre, Hayward, Paul Washington Jr., and Big Dick Nick Richards. That was how it went. In terms of their free agency upcoming, they've only got $31 million in cap space, which is still a good amount, but it's nowhere near what we saw the Rockets or the Spurs or the Pistons have. They've got some decisions to make with some guys as well. Kelly Oubre Jr. is an unrestricted free agent, and we'll talk more about him later. I was surprised at how they utilized him this season. Was he good? I guess that's in the eye of the beholder. But putting the offense in Kelly Oubre's hands as they did all season meant that they were the worst offense in the NBA. So take from that what you will. I have no real understanding of Oubre's market. Remember, when he signed with the Hornets, nobody wanted him. He was like the last free agent to sign, basically, and it didn't happen until midway through September. Just nobody signed him. It was very strange because, again, I think that some of his value is just very limited, and I don't know where it goes. Will they bring him back? I don't really know why they would, but they could. They make weird decisions all the time. He's a very interesting player. Dennis Smith and Svi Mykhailiuk, who were putting up big numbers down the end. Smith, to me, has established himself as a legitimate backup NBA point guard. Svi, it's really hard to judge because there was no Ball, no Rozier, no Hayward, no Washington at times, and but he played well. He's only 25, Svi, and I'm not actually going to get into talking about Svi a lot in this show because there's a lot more other interesting younger players that are worth looking at. But Mykhailiuk probably gets himself another role somewhere. But what he did was when nobody was around. And that makes it a little bit hard to judge. And then for the restricted guys, the big one here is going to be PJ Washington Jr. They didn't come to an agreement on a rookie extension before the season. I'm not sure he comes back. I thought he was okay. He's still young. It's been 4 years. Has he taken gigantic steps forward? I don't know. I could see him asking for $20 million a year. And I could see if I was the GM saying, thanks, go get that somewhere else. I have no interest in bringing him back at that price. And I don't see it. I think PJ is on another team next season, and I don't really think we're ever going to get big stuff from PJ for fantasy. You've also got Teo Maledon, who I thought played okay in Oklahoma City, got waived, and then I think he was part of that trade with the Rockets where he got waived, signed as a two-way for the Hornets, but ended up playing quite a bit, especially down the stretch of the season. Still significant shooting issues, but I think there might be a role for him as like a Hull Neto, 12th player on a roster, third string point guard. He was interesting enough. Didn't do enough to make me go, yeah, we've got to pay up. But, if he gets 2 year minimum deal, player option or something, I could see that happening. Wouldn't be shocked. They've got an interesting haul of draft picks. They've actually got 5 top 41 draft picks. That's a lot. They've got the 4th best lottery odds, which according to all of these projected picks aren't what I would do. They're not my board. They're not fit related. They're just like I think I've got 9 or 8 mock drafts in my database, and this is where the average position would put these guys. It's got Armin Thompson at 4. Him and LaMelo Ball together would be very interesting. Very interesting. I think no matter who they get here, whether it's, if they move up and they get Victor, obviously, but whatever they get, like Scoot, could he work with LaMelo? Yes. Brandon Miller, would he be a great fit? Awesome. Armin Thompson, yes. Jarris Walker, probably yes. Like Anthony Black, I'm not sure about that one. Sir Thompson, maybe. There's a lot of open gaps on this team because they are a team who was bad, but a lot of the players that played were old. So, whatever you get as a younger guy, considering they've screwed up so many draft picks, there is value in this. There's nowhere I go, you're not going to make sense here. Like when I go to the Rockets and go, they got Şengün and Smith, obviously you take Wembanyama, but if Wembanyama wasn't that level of prospect and he was the Armin Thompson level of prospect, you go, well, maybe I just take another player at the same position who's the same level of prospect. The Hornets don't really have that concern. I don't think anyway. And then they've got pick 27, which would be Noah Clowney from Alabama, a guy that preliminarily I'm very interested in as a player. They've got pick 34, 39, and 41, which projects to James Nagy, who is a guy playing in Spain this season. One of the guys that's a projected second-round guy that I'm very interested in. I'm less interested in Daron Holmes, the second, or Ricky Council, the fourth, who would be projected at 39 and 41. Council's a little bit older, Arkansas. Holmes, where's Holmes from? Dayton, I think. Not that interested in him. Nagy, I am. So, they've got a lot of picks here. But as you see when we go through this team, while they've got a lot of their upper end guys are old, the back end of their roster are all young guys with some argument to have some level of pedigree, which is a weird position to be in. Now, I know yesterday on the Spurs show, I forgot to do the listener question. So I'm going to do it right now for the Hornets as we go here through and have a look from Take Haver 5. He says, assuming they don't win the lottery, what should they do with their big rotation next season and beyond? Well, if they don't win the lottery, well, it's very clearly to me, it's Mark Williams, right? Mark Williams is the starter. Nick Richards is the backup. And even if they do win the lottery, I think that Victor Wembanyama and Mark Williams play together. I will continue to say this. I do not believe that Victor Wembanyama will be playing the majority of minutes at center for a good 4 or 5 years. I think that he plays, he can shoot, he can dribble, he can pass, he can defend on the perimeter, he can defend on the pick and roll, he can protect the rim. Think Jaren Jackson, right? He can play next to a center like Mark Williams. He can do that. So even if they win Victor, Mark Williams would start. It would probably cut into a little bit of Nick Richards' minutes and pay probably a bit of Williams' upside. But the other thing you have to worry about there is if Steve Clifford's the coach. Like, does Wembanyama play 20 minutes a night? Steve Clifford's record with rookies is pretty abysmal in terms of playing them big minutes. So that would be a concern. But I think that maybe Victor does develop into being a center at some point. He probably does at year 4, year 5. But I don't think that impacts a huge amount early on. And this is another interesting question. Over under. 2.5 players who we know that will start for the Hornets next season. I think it's under. I say that LaMelo Ball we know is going to start. Their other starters are let's say Haywood, Rozier, Washington, and Williams. Washington's a free agent. Rozier and Haywood, I don't know, because Miles Bridges will come back, I'm guessing, to this team. Rozier would start, but will they keep him? Will they trade him? I say it's under. I say I know that Mark Williams will start. I know that LaMelo Ball will start. But out of Haywood, Rozier, Washington, I'm not. And even like I could throw Bridges in there. I don't even know that he's going to be back. But if he was back, he would start. But I don't know that he's back. So I'll say an under situation there, which is pretty weird to say. Today's episode and the most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. I'm going to give it to Malcolm Brogdon because, surprisingly, he won the 6th Man of the Year award. I thought for sure all that buzz was going towards Emmanuel Quickley and Quickley was going to win it. But no, Brogdon and his steady role as a reserve all season, great shooting on one of the best teams, gets him the award. Is he the most electric player? Yeah, he is for this week. And the all-new, all-electric Nissan Ariya is just like Brogdon. It's smart. We know how smart Brogdon is, right? We know that. It's what people call him the president. But he's also fundamentally sound. He has exciting moments. He is accurate in what he does. And that's exactly like the Nissan Ariya. It packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. The EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, now I am going to bring another question across here. It's from Matt Lawson, who's been on this show, NBA Dynasty ADP. And for some reason, this crop thing is not bringing across all the information that I needed to, which is annoying. But anyway, his question is, are you buying or selling these industry dynasty ranking averages for Charlotte? And I think what's important here for me to talk about is going through the list. You can see a couple on screen there. LaMelo Ball at 7, Mark Williams 64, then there's Rozier 84, PJ Washington 94, Oubre 150, Haywood 187, Miles Bridges 189, Nick Richards 191, Dennis Smith 223. To me, the absolute unbelievable standout number there is Miles Bridges, and you can have whatever issue you want morally with what he did, which is obviously a shit bloke act, like terrible stuff. And if he didn't play in the NBA, I wouldn't actually ever again, I wouldn't care. All right, but he is going to play. So 189 for him is an insane ranking. It is ridiculous that he has been pushed down that far. If you are in a dynasty situation and he is being drafted late, you have to get him. If that abides by how you feel, do I want this guy on my team? Like, there are plenty of guys who do shit things in the NBA that we often ignore. Bridges is pretty high profile. It's one of the worst ones we've seen in recent memory. But that, in terms of if this guy's name was John Smith and he's a top 70 player, and he's going at 189, then you can see the value. I think LaMelo at 7 is actually sliding a little bit. I think he's probably a higher option than that. I think Washington's a little high at 94. And Williams at 64 is interesting. I think that's probably about the right spot for him. We'll get more into these guys now. Let's just start with LaMelo Ball. Because it was a really bad season for LaMelo Ball. We know that. And I think it's going to lead to some interesting things for him moving forward. He was the 23rd ranked player on a per game basis, but 153rd totals. He's -1 ranked though, 13th. His points ranked 16th. Now, when he hurt his ankle in the preseason, I had him at about 8, I think. And then when he hurt his ankle, I said, all right, he's going down to the 12, 13 zone where I had Kyrie around that area. Because I just don't know when he's going to come back. Let's push him way back down. And obviously on a per game basis, that's where he ended up. He shot really poorly this season, and his points league numbers were there. His ADP ended up at 13. Is it a bad pick? Of course it is. All right. Of course it is, but is it a bad pick based on what? Do we know he was going to sprain his ankle 2 more times, then break his ankle? No, you didn't. It's always a risk with an ankle, an injury in preseason, but again, it was an ankle sprain. We thought, all right, he'll miss a week or 2. That's fine. He didn't. Then he came back, and then he got injured again. Then he came back, then got injured again. And then he got injured again for the rest of the season. It's going to push him way down. He is not going to go in the first round next season. He's probably going to go end of second round. And I'm not sure that there's really any reason that I would avoid him. He is still 21. He'll be 22, I think, in November. He's 22 after the season starts. He played 36 games only, but played 35 minutes and had 29 usage. He averaged 23 points. He averaged 4 threes a game. 6.5 boards, 8.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists. So why was he only 23rd? Well, he shot 41% from the field. That is it. Everything else is amazing here. 84 from the line. If that 41, and he's done it in the past, if he becomes a 44% shooter, he's a top 10 guy again. Look how young he is. Look at those numbers. Yes, the injury is very, very frustrating. But I think it's just a lost season type scenario for him. The efficiency stuff, he never was at his best. But the fact that Steve Clifford played him 35 minutes a night despite coming off multiple injuries, and he was able to get a big usage, I'm pretty encouraged. His advanced numbers are still strong. Look at this. He was 78th percentile on estimated wins, which is a cumulative total stat, despite playing 36 games. His EPM, 87th percentile. His Darko, he was 88th in the league. His LeBron, 66th percentile. A little bit worrying if you look at the Darko graph that there were some declines as the season went on. In terms of projecting, again, Darko views what we've done, but also with some sort of forward look. So this is like, okay, there's a little bit of a drop-off here. Maybe we're reducing his overall ceiling. But I think that he is going to have a massive shot at top 10 next season. Again, so much depends on what happens in the offseason. He's also a big risk if this team decides to continue to be shithouse, that he says, can you guys get me out of here? Like, what is this team? Like, I don't want to be here. There's a massive risk of that. But I think really whatever team he goes to, he's going to be able to put up most of these numbers the same. The thing you worry about is usage and whether that maintains at that level. But I think there's a big bounce back coming. And you can see all the gaps in LaMelo's graph here for the points per game graph. They're all over the place. But when he plays, his fantasy points are way higher than his minutes continually. That's a sign of a great fantasy player. And every time he came back, it was just business as usual. Big games, big performances. And you see at the start, like there's just no games here. Right? That's what he came back, got hurt, that was it. Really frustrating. And then nice stretch there, another injury, nice stretch here, and then done with a broken ankle. His EPM graph, pretty solid, but again, hard to get good averages when you're barely playing. And then when he came back the second time, some very, very strong play. He was good. And I think we're going to forget how good he actually was this season because we're going to be like, oh, he's just hurt all season. I'm never going to draft him. Never again. He ruined me. And I think we're going to turn him into a little bit of an early draft discount guy for next season, who then will end up pushing in too high because people adjust. But for Dynasty, at 7, as Matt said, I don't mind that. I think he's probably a top 5 Dynasty guy. I think he's 21. He's a top 5 Dynasty guy. He's going to be his 4th season in the NBA. He's 6 months younger than Keegan Murray. He's a year older than Brandon Miller. Let's look at Terry Rozier. Disappointing season. You know I've talked about Rozier a lot and how frustrated I am with him. How he was bad as a shooter for a long time, and then he came to Charlotte and he was bad as well. And then had a couple of seasons where he was just unbelievable mid-range shooter. I said, how do I believe this? I've seen it be bad for so long. And then he did it for 2 straight years. And I went, I'm convinced. And then he went back to being bad. And I don't know where to sit with that. He's 29. He was the 92nd ranked player, 102 in totals, 68th in -1, which again accounts for how bad that field goal percentage was. His points league rank was 53, and he was drafted ADP 48. So if you're in a points league, you got him at 48. He finished 53rd, no problem. 60s in totals, no worries. And he had that weird ankle injury, which cost him 3 weeks of doubtful tags earlier on in the season, and then the fake injury towards the end of the year. He played 63 games, 35 minutes, 26 usage. We got 4 assists because they don't have any other point guards that they wanted to use. 21 points, 2.5 threes, 1.2 steals. But just the overall decline in efficiency. 41 from the field, 32 from the line. 32 from 3, and 81 from the line is a big, big decrease from where he'd been in the past. And some of his impact stuff dropped as well. Negative 0.4 EPM is not great. He still was okay for volume-wise and estimated wins. His LeBron was below average for a starter. His Darko was a negative at 164. And you can see that graph, how once he came to Charlotte on this Darko graph, you can see improvement, like so many improvements. And then this season, everything dropped off pretty significantly. And you worry that at age 29, where LaMelo is going to play a full season next season and another, perhaps wing guard comes in, that Rozier's season where he was able to bump his assists because LaMelo was out, he was able to bump his usage because LaMelo was out, and at a little bit older, that I'm definitely not going top 50 for him again. I think that if he finished around the 70s, 80s mark for the next couple of years, I think that would be crazy. The end of the season's pretty rough for him because there was that weird game where he played like 12 minutes and then had a fake injury and then never played again. He was very, very up and down, especially with his shooting numbers. It did improve as the season went on, but I'm a little worried given his age. Nice little spike here in the middle with his EPM, but I don't really think there's a huge amount that that we need to take out of that for big Tez Rozier. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Let's go to PJ Washington Jr. Really set up for him to have a good season, and he didn't. Was he bad? No, he wasn't. But was he good? No. 112th in category leagues, 89th in totals, 122nd in -1 rank, 98th in points leagues. His ADP was 98. But remember, there was no Miles Bridges. There was injuries to Gordon Hayward. There was injuries to LaMelo Ball. And I thought he could be like in the 80s. But he was so, apologies to Jay Crowder, but
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
he was just all over the place. He's going to be 25. He's a restricted free agent. He played 33 minutes with 20 usage. He averaged 15 points and 2 threes, but under 5 rebounds as a power forward. 0.9 steals, 1.1 blocks, 44, 35, 73. Really hurt you in percentages. He was wildly all over the place. And a guy that plays that many games, but still is like 112th per game, it's not that useful. Like, it's fine. You have him, but it's not good enough. With everything that was opened up for him to be successful this season, the fact that to me he stagnated or went backwards is a little bit of a red flag where he moves. And say he stays in Charlotte, like, do they just start Bridges over him? Of course, they could draft Brandon Miller and Steve Clifford could say, well, Brandon, I know you're young, so you're going to have to play 15 minutes a night for the first 50 games, and they start Bridges and Washington together with Hayward coming off the bench. I don't know. But my hopes for him in the future are pretty low, and as you can see on that Darko graph, Darko just pinged him. They went, nah, look, things are not working particularly well here. We're really dropping this forward projection stuff. In points leagues, he was okay, but still wild. The blue line's the points. Look at the wild up and downs, the wild inconsistencies. He ended the season injured with a fake injury, so we don't need to worry too much about that. But I just really do worry about, like, is he actually a starter that you'd want? Look, he's got theoretical size. Well, not size. He's only 6'8". I think maybe that's the problem. He's only 6'8", so he's not really power forward size. He can't really play as a 3. He can play some small ball center, but maybe that's his future role. 20-minute a night, small ball center, some power forward minutes. Which, again, if I had him in a dynasty league, I'd be pretty concerned about where this leaves us with his value. He's only 25, or not just 25 yet. He's going to turn 25 soon at the start of next season. But this was the chance for him to start to establish himself. Shout out to contract years, by the way. And he didn't do it. And I don't really know where that takes him. Let's talk Kelly Oubre, because it was a very weird season for him as well. Now, once Steve Clifford got hired with Oubre, I said, look, and Oubre was here, I said, ooh, Clifford's going to hate this bloke. Doesn't pass, doesn't defend, and requires so much usage. I'm so out on him. And then I got proved wrong over and over again. This is why. He was 124th in categories. That is not very good. It's just not. For a guy that played 32 minutes and had 26 usage, that is a bad number. 113th in -1 rank is not particularly strong either. Points league's great, 73rd overall. But basically everything worked again in his favor. There was no Ball, then there was no Hayward, and there was no Rozier, and there was no Bridges. There was someone out all the time, enabling him to start a big chunk of the games. And then, of course, he got hurt with a broken thumb. But the fact that they just said, all right, Oubre, you are our offense, was either one of the most genius stealth tank moves of all time, or a complete misrepresentation or understanding of how this guy is as a player. I don't ever want to run a team where he's getting 32 minutes and 26 usage. We saw what happens. It's bad. He averaged 20 points. He hit 2 threes, 5 rebounds, 1.4 steals. Like, none of those numbers are terrible. They're not. But 43% shooting, 32 from the line, 32 from 3, 76 from the line. He never passes. He's a gigantic black hole. He's a gambler on defense. His advanced numbers are not great, but they're not terrible. He was negative. He was 0 for EPM, which is 71st percentile. 3.1 in estimated wins, which is okay. But when you're getting that much of the ball, you got to do more. Darko, negative 0.8. LeBron, 13th percentile compared to starters. And still, on the Darko graph, did tend to drop off a little bit as the overall curve line, but his production was strong. It just doesn't make any sense for a team to use Oubre in the way that he was used for the Hornets this season. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So when we're looking at how this translates, now again, I was wrong on Oubre all season. I didn't expect that he would play this much or get this much usage. I was right in that he's a black hole who is an inefficient shooter. That was all correct. But I thought that would actually cost him touches and minutes, and it didn't. All right, that's fine. And am I going to double down on being wrong? Sure. Because I'm going to tell you, I don't really see that as being a winning formula for whatever team has him moving forward. Is he going to be a draftable guy next season? I highly, highly doubt that. I doubt it. The graph in the middle there where he broke his thumb, he was out. Like, he was putting up strong fantasy points numbers, but it required 32 minutes and 26 usage. And again, that's one of the things we need to think about. Is this a realistic expectation for him moving forward? I would suggest probably not. His EPM graph, he had some solid numbers, had a bit of a drop-off before he got injured, and some really interesting spikes towards the end. He had some okay moments. EPM probably the advanced metric that liked him the most out of LeBron and Darko. But at age 27, he's theoretically in his peak. Is he a winning basketball player? I don't think so. So, situation for him in free agency is going to be very, very intriguing. Because that's all it's going to be. Like, where do you go? How many minutes do you get? What's your usage? That's the key. Gordon Hayward, yeah, looked really bad, I thought. Again, the opportunity was here for him with so many guys out, and he just looked bad. He was 132nd in category leagues. I thought he could be, honestly, with an ADP of 111, that's a great spot. A guy that we assumed would start, he did. We assumed would play 30 minutes plus, he did. We thought could get more touches, more assist opportunities, especially with LaMelo going down in the preseason. I was all in. But he just was passive as. Points league's 119th, category league's 132nd. Of course, he got hurt as well with that fractured shoulder blade that the team misdiagnosed. And you've heard me rant about this team's injury reporting all season. We saw Hayward's wife talk about how bad they were. They would list Cody Martin doubtful for 3 weeks in a row. And then, we're not even going to talk about Cody Martin on this show, but I still don't know what happened. He had knee surgery, came back, played 3 games, and we never saw him again. In January. Just never heard a thing about what happened to him. We don't know what happened to nearly every one of these players. It's really frustrating. They're a horrible, horrible franchise with horrible injury reporting, and it appears like, according to Hayward, some bad medical stuff. But he played 32 minutes, 19 usage with all those players out. He averaged 14 points, 1-3. He shot 33% from 3. He had some real free throw issues as well, but they improved as the season went on. Like 4 assists, 0.8 steals. He's just not that guy anymore. I thought he could push to 25 usage easy on this team. But no, just absolutely absent any level of aggression. I don't know what the hell happens with him. I don't think he's going to be a draftable player next season. He is 33 already. The decline hit very hard this season. As you can see on that Darko graph, it was bad. Like, that's a big, big drop. That's a very concerning drop. And I don't think there's going to be any situation that I could see him as a 12-team draftable player next season. Injuries, passivity, shooting decline, on-court decline. Where the hell he fits on this team, no interest. Fantasy points graph, some interesting good performances here, but again, there was just so few and far between that the reliability of this moving forward is pretty low. We can always see that the fantasy point spike ties in with an EPM spike here in that February-March period, which he did start to put up some good numbers where he was rosterable when Oubre was out and LaMelo was out, and it was okay. But again, it didn't look good for Hayward, and I don't really have any level of high faith for him moving forward. Let's talk about the big fella.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Yeah, look, it was, again, extraordinarily frustrating to deal with Steve Clifford and his hatred of rookies. Oh, but Josh, he doesn't hate him. Look, he actually played him and started him. Yeah, that's fine. But he played the first 30 games of the season in the G League. And then we have these random situations where Williams would push into the backup role and then they would take him out of the backup role for one game at a time. And then we saw the stupidness at the end of the season where we're going to rotate 3 centers through in the rotation. It's just the way Clifford handles rookies. It's a consistent thing, and it makes me absolutely shit scared that they've got the 4th best lottery odds, that we're going to have a Scoot or a Victor or a Thompson or a Miller on this team, and they're going to be playing 20 minutes a night. That makes me very worried. He has had top 4 picks before. Is a top 4 pick of Cody Zeller the same as having a top 4 pick of Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson or Victor Wembanyama? Absolutely not. But it was a top 4 pick. He had a top 6 pick in Mo Bamba, who never played. Like, he doesn't play these guys. And yes, those guys that we think are going to go at this point are interesting prospects. But if they slide to 6 and they get Jarris Walker or they get Anthony Black or they get Asir Thompson at 6, they're not doing anything. They're just not going to play. Anyway, in saying that, Mark Williams, despite playing only 43 games and only 19 minutes, was 144th in category leagues. He was 170th in points leagues. He's a better category league player than points league player. Wasn't drafted anywhere. Again, because we said he's not going to play. He's just not. 16 usage is fine. 9 points, 7 rebounds, 0.7 steals, 1 block. And you go, they're not inspiring numbers. Yes, I know. He played 19 minutes. So add 50% onto that. 13 points, 10 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, 1.1 steals. Good start. Right? It's a good start as a regular starter. 64% shooting, 69% from the line.
Giggity.
This is a guy who I don't think he's a future all-star center. He's not a guy that I look at and go, well, he's completely irreplaceable. Like, you can't get another center in over him. But I do think let's look at a 3 to 4 year period here at least, that he will lock in as a starting center. Could he peak at DeAndre Ayton? Yes. Actually, not true. Probably not as good of a scorer. Definitely not as good of a scorer, but Ayton's not a big usage guy either. But around that level of production, top 50-ish type numbers. And I think that he will end up going relatively high next season. Probably top 70. But again, the Clifford factor is there. I know a lot of people are worried, but I can't trust this rotation. What are they just going to have a minute share between him and Nick Richards? And I honestly don't fear that at all. As much as I can criticize Steve Clifford for his handling of Richards, for Williams, when Plumlee was gone, once Williams started, he played 30 minutes basically every night. The problem was we got to that weird state at the end of the season where he broke his thumb, and then he came back and they win that final 5-6 games, and we're all right, we're just going to just throw shit against the wall and just rotate guys through. But basically, when Plumlee was gone, Williams started, played 39 minutes, played 28, 30 minutes a night. Every night, Richards played 18. Richards was strong, but Williams was their guy. And I think there'll be frustrations with that next season if this is the rotation they go with. You know, if they don't bring in another center, which I don't think they will. I actually don't have too many concerns with it. Showed some improvement, obviously, with his Darko graph. I think he's going to be a positive player moving forward. His fantasy points, he's not as good fantasy points in category leagues. He's probably like 100th, 110th over the next couple of years in points leagues, but top 50 potential in a category league. So I'm very excited, and I'm not that worried about the Nick Richards thing, even not that worried about the Wembanyama thing. This graph's a little concerning that once he had that situation of, once he got into the starting lineup, his EPM impact dropped significantly. He was better as a backup, which you can see early on here where he missed. Look at all those blue dots. See those blue dots on this graph if you're watching this. They're all the games he didn't play. Look at that. He's never played to begin the season. And then came in as a backup, put up some really big numbers, and then got into the starting lineup and his impact dropped way off. That's a little bit of a concern. His upside is nowhere near as high as Jalen Duren, for example, in my mind. He is a solid enough starting center that, let's say maybe best case scenario is Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen's a very good fantasy player, but not a high scorer. Williams' best case can get to that. That's unbelievably valuable for fantasy. Unbelievably. But there's no real, well, what if he passes? What if he shoots? What if he becomes high usage? I don't think any of that's happening. So he's an interesting guy in that respect. He's 21, a little bit older for a rookie, but not too old. Let's go to a surprise player, the old wood-slanger himself, Dennis Smith Jr. He was 169th in category leagues, 148th in points leagues, obviously not drafted anywhere. We didn't even know that he'd make the roster. He was on like a non-guaranteed camp deal. And then when LaMelo went down, that made the decision a lot easier. And he has turned himself into legitimately one of the best defensive guards in the NBA. The problem is the offense sucks. It's so bad. He's 25. He played 54 games, 26 minutes a night because of all the injuries to Rozier, Oubre, Ball. Expecting 25, 26 a night for him is not what you want. 17 usage, 9 points in 26 minutes is very low. 0.4 threes on 22% is horrendous. But 5 assists, 1.4 steals, half a block. That's what he's good at. He can pass, he can defend. 74 from the line, 41 overall. He hurts you in a lot of different areas. The lack of scoring, the bad shooting, but assist, steals, out of position blocks, he's a good fantasy player. I thought he's a very good impact player. The numbers reflect that. 75th percentile EPM, 71st estimated wins. Darko is negative 0.2, which is top half of the league. LeBron, a little bit low, but 37th percentile compared to starters. When he's a backup, that's not bad. And as you can see, when he went from being a rookie on this Darko graph, where he struggled so much, and then sort of focused and turned himself into a defensive-minded point guard, look at the impact rise. Look how much better he became just doing defensive stuff and turning into this unbelievable defensive guard. So there's a role for him in the NBA. There is a strong role for him in the NBA. 26 minutes a night seems foolish to expect. And again, they could get another guy in here. So he's not guaranteed big roles moving forward. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 100 guy, but he's always going to be that player that if something happens and he's forced into a role, we have to pay attention. His fantasy points graph, there's not a lot that tells us anything there, I don't think. And his EPM graph, he missed a bunch of time himself with an ankle injury where he had a real opportunity to take a big role there and got hurt himself. Had some struggles when he came back, but reestablished himself as just a solid level, upper half impact player in the NBA, which for Dennis Smith, that's a huge W to be a solid impact player. Let's talk about Big Dick Nick, because we were frustrated that he was immediately given the backup center role over Mark Williams. But Richards did play well. I'll give you that. Second round pick out of Kentucky. He's already 25 though. Like, he's an older rookie. Well, he was an older rookie when he came in, not last year. He was an older rookie when he came in. And he's already 25. 184th in category leagues. Had some moments where you could stream him in for sure. 65 games, 19 minutes, 15 usage. He averaged 8 points, 6.5 boards, 1.1 blocks, which are all really strong in 19 minutes. 63% shooting, 74 from the line. But ideally, he's a backup center. His advanced metrics are pretty bad. Negative 2.3 EPM. He was a plus 0.5 in estimated wins. LeBron and Darko didn't like him. He had a few little moments there you can see on the Darko graph, but in the end, production did dip a little bit. He had some rim protection strengths, but also had some games where he just couldn't generate defensive stats. He's no real scalability offensively. He was strong, but again, when I look at him versus Williams, 4-year age difference, Williams already a better contributor in my mind. There's no reason in the world that I say they will play 25 minutes, 24 minutes a night. I don't think that's possible. And I don't think that a team is going to look at someone like I talked yesterday on the Spurs one about Charles Bassey. I could see him having a role where some team goes, hey, we might get you as a cheap starter for 2-3 years and he'd be really good. I don't think Richards even has that level of intrigue to become a starter somewhere if it's not for an injury to an incumbent starter already. But he did take some steps forward this season, which was impressive. He's never going to be a good fantasy points guy. Missed this bunch of games in the middle here where he missed was when Mark Williams overtook him to be the backup, and then he got back into the rotation when the cockroach Mason Plumlee got traded. The APM graph, again, started up pretty strongly when he got the surprise nod as the backup, and people added him everywhere in fantasy early on in the season, and then obviously went back to a reduced role, and he was just like, okay. He was okay. It was a big improvement from where he's been in the past, but nothing that absolutely makes me go, yeah, look how exciting. And now we get to a bunch of absolute spuds, but we need to talk about it. Now, again, the guys I'm not going to go into detail in. I'm not going to talk about Maladon. I'm not going to talk about Mihailuk in detail. I'm not going to talk about Cody Martin and his 2 games. And I'm not going to talk about even James Bouknight because I don't have time to go through everyone, but I don't think Bouknight is actually a viable NBA rotation or starting player. But I'm going to talk about some guys who showed more than Bouknight over these last couple of names. And one of them is Kai Jones, who I think is also bad. One of the worst first rounds you could ever have 2 years ago where they picked both Bouknight and Jones in the top 20, and I think they're both bad. He was 355th in category leagues. There's nothing that hugely stands out there. He's 22 years of age, 46 games, 12 minutes, 12 usage, 3 points, 0.7 blocks. The 0.7 blocks is interesting. Now, in theory, Kai Jones has a fantasy game. Points, rebounds, threes, blocks. Okay percentage. Like 56 from the field is great. 73 from the line from the big is really strong. 21 from 3 obviously leaves a lot to be desired. But 12 usage is really bad. I thought towards the end of the season he started to play better. I think he probably is more of a 4 than a 5. But there are just so many other guys there. Williams, Richards, say Washington, Bridges. I don't really know where Jones fits. Some honestly horrific type advanced numbers. Apart from Darko, which is not bad on him. And the Darko shows over the second half of the season the improvements that he made. He did take some steps forward, which is what we're really focusing on here for Jones. Again, age 22. He's older than LaMelo Ball. And he hasn't shown anything for me to suggest that he is a starting caliber player. But there were a few little flashes there where I go, okay, if something figures out here, let's give him one more year to see if he can establish as maybe a rotation level big man. But if he never finished top 300 in fantasy, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Again, we saw the concentration of fantasy points improve at the end of the season where he started getting rotation roles. He flashed okay, but honestly, it wasn't anything to get us excited. And then, as often happens with these guys, if you look at his EPM graph, once he started getting minutes, the algorithm and the formula said, oh yeah, there's a reason he doesn't get these minutes, and his impact becomes much lower. It's easier to have higher impact in lower minutes, and then when he starts playing more, the system goes, yeah, you're shit ass. And that's sort of what happened. So my faith in him, pretty limited. What about the God of Hammers, JT Thor?
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
That was his second season. He's only 20, so he is quite young. He was very young when he was drafted, only 18. 423rd in category leagues, 429th in points leagues. Nothing really to suggest he's better in either one of those formats. He played 69 games, which is a lot more than I expected.
Giggity.
14 minutes, 13% usage. 4 points, 2 rebounds, 0.3 steals, 0.3 blocks. Now, part of his appeal coming out of Auburn was, hey, you're a 6'10 power forward who blocks shots, who can pass a little bit, and has some shooting range. Hasn't really happened. 40% shooting overall, 32 from 3 is marginally interesting, and he hit 0.6 threes in 14 minutes. Okay. 70 from the line is okay, but the passing, the defensive numbers, 0.3 blocks, doesn't cut it. Although it is in 14 minutes, but that's you double that, 28 minutes, 0.6. It's not good enough. And he had opportunities to start at the end of the season when PJ Washington was out. His advanced numbers are horrific. Negative 5.3 in EPM, that's 7th percentile. He was a negative estimated wins, which is bad. He was 0th percentile in LeBron compared to starters. His Darko was 484th out of 510 players. They were dreadful. And as you can see, his fantasy points graph, he got minutes at the end of the season. And as so often happens, and this is the name of the game in fantasy points most of the time, follow the minutes. We did the correlations on this last offseason that minutes leads to more fantasy points. It is a high correlation. Usage leads to more fantasy points. They're the two things you look at. And you can see it here, how tightly intertwined they are. Minutes, more production. And he got that role. Was he good in it? Don't know about that. And you can have a look at what happens again. What happens when you get the minutes? How did your impact go? Oh, yeah, ugly. When he played, things went really, really bad for him. I still have, again, he's 20. I still think he can develop into a interesting rotation piece. I think he's a better option than Kai Jones moving forward. The shooting showed a little bit of intrigue, but it's got to be better defensively. He's got to generate more defensive stats. I think there's a chance that he can have 1 or 2 top 250 seasons, JT Thor, but I'm not feeling super confident on that. And the next one is a rookie, second-round pick, Bryce McGowan's. Last guy we're going to talk about here. He was one of the worst players in the NBA. But the fact that Steve Clifford actually gave him some minutes was intriguing. 427th in category leagues, 397th in points leagues, 20 years of age, 46 games, 17 minutes, 15 usage, 5 points, 1.2 assists, 0.6 threes, 40% shooting, 33 from 3, 75 from the line. The overall efficiency is a real problem there. The low usage as a guard is very weird. He started quite a few games towards the end as a wing. His advanced metrics are honestly horrible. 5th percentile EPM, 492 on Darko. 2nd percentile LeBron, negative estimated wins. The Darko graph seems to think he's getting worse towards the end of the season. That's not great. But like yesterday when talking about Blake Wesley, they are wing players who flashed a little bit to me, where I go, these sort of wing players and guard players, despite, again, the common narrative that you hear, the bigs take longer, it's false. Wings and guards who get out there and do a few little things, like, okay, look back at the career of Chris Middleton. Great example. Not everyone's in this example, but, shocking first couple of years. Really bad. Jordan Poole first couple of years. Not that Jordan Poole's good at the moment, but Jordan Poole's first couple of years, disastrous. Just, it takes a little... Darius Garland, dreadful as a rookie. It takes a little bit of time. And I saw something from McGowan's when I had to make my decision of who is the last player I was going to talk about. Is it McGowan's or Bouknight? I went with McGowan's. He's younger than Bouknight. I think he's better than Bouknight. I think he's got some scope to play as a ball handling 2, play up a little bit at the 3, maybe handle the 1 a little bit. There was something here from him. So I just wanted to highlight that. And towards the end of the season, we saw again the minutes go up, the fantasy points go up with it. He had some okay games. Not great, but some okay games for sure. EPM, as he started to get minutes, it didn't decrease, which again is a good sign. He wasn't good, but it didn't kill his overall value in that situation. So I think we'll keep that as somewhat of a positive for Bryce McGowan. It's not a huge positive, but we'll keep it as somewhat of a positive. So he's a name to watch that if he's sitting on a Dynasty League waiver wire and Jones is out there or Bouknight's out there, I'd probably go with McGowan's. I don't feel good about it, but I'd probably go with McGowan's. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you're on YouTube, you thumb it up and you leave those sexy comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.